So what you think gonna happen?
Man, I think Sergei gonna happen. I think Sergei gonna happen.
You think Sergei gonna knock out Curtis Blaydes? With another UFC Fight Night preview and breakdown. We're gonna take a look at the main card first and then the prelims, but stick around for the entire video because this card is actually fire from beginning to end. It's a lot of gems sprinkled in this card. When you go and look at the first fight on the main card, we got Jeremiah Wells coming back versus Matthew Simmonsberger. I think this is a fantastic fight.
I like really both fighters. I don't know who I'm going to pick for this one. Who's the most skillful fighter? We know they both got one punch knockout power. Who's the most skilled fighter, man? I might think Matthew Simmonsberger is the more skilled fighter, but Jeremiah Wells might be the more complete fighter, if that makes sense. But at the same time, I think Jeremiah Wells, he's going to have to stay on the outside. He got like a bunch of reach. And Matthews, he got to get on the inside like he did against Jake Matthews and throw the short right hook, or he could throw the overhand right too.
And I tell you what, man, that last fight with Matthew Simmonsberger and Jake Matthews, it was impressive because for a lot of those rounds, Jake was winning. He was doing the work. And then Simmonsberger hit him one time and literally changed the complexion of the entire round, and he arguably won one or two of them 10-8.
Matthew Simmonsberger, the way he's setting up his right hand, he's doing it more in a clever way. He's doing it in a clever way because what he do is he'll go to the body, he'll do feints, and then he'll come over the top.
It's funny you say that because watching the fight, I was like, how is Matthew Simmonsberger going to be able to use his power against Jake Matthews? Because Jake got a good fight IQ, and he know what to look out for. So the fact that he was able to keep catching him with the same thing almost in just about every round, it just speaks to how Matthew is growing, not just with power and athleticism, but actual fight IQ and cleverness. And Jeremiah Wells, on the other hand, I'm sure he's well improved as well. Obviously, he got good knockout power and everything like that, but it'll be nice to see what else he's been working on because we haven't seen him in a while. So he was good as he was before the layoff. So I can imagine that he's gotten better.
But
so,
one thing I don't like about Jeremiah is his chin up in the air and hands down. So I mean, against Matthew, he's gonna have his hands up.
And that weird thing from like UFC 271 where he circled around the cage first, and then remember he slipped and fell, and then
I guess he'd be so excited, man.
I don't know. Don't do that in this fight. Don't do that at all. Yasmine Lucindo. Remember her from the Yasmine Yaragui fight?
Yeah.
Her and Brogan Walker. Now Brogan just lost the Ultimate Fighter, and this is a good fight, but I think that the experience kind of goes to Yasmine a little bit.
No, the experience goes to Brogan. She's been around. She fought Erin Blanchfield. She fought Miranda.
Oh, that's my fault then.
They both got experience, but Brogan got experience fighting top notch.
See, that's my fault because I'm talking about like UFC experience, like actual. I know Yasmine lost her.
Right.
I know she lost. No, but you're right too. I know she lost her UFC debut, but the way she fought was so good.
Yeah.
It was just like, wow. Like she kept her composure because she made a lot of mistakes in that fight. And it was still good.
I'm gonna tell you one thing about Yasmine. She don't normally fight like that. She's a grappler. Like if you go back and look at her fight, especially in Brazil, she's taking people down, ground and pounding them. She's taking people down and choking them out. So it was weird how she fought. I guess she fought Jasmine like that because she couldn't take her down.
Yeah.
Because Jasmine has a great takedown defense. But it's weird because the way to beat Brogan is on the ground. Because if you go back and look at some of the fights like Pearl Gonzalez, Erin Blanchfield, they were just taking her down and ragdolling her. Juliana Miller. If you look at Yasmine, the way she fights, she's a grappler. She's a wrestler. So I think this is a recipe for disaster for Brogan, man. I think she's going to take Brogan down.
And I'm going to be honest with you. Yasmine made a lot of mistakes in the Yaragui fight, but she showed a lot of impressive abilities. I mean, physical, mental. She showed a lot. The only thing I was worried about was that cardio because she threw a lot of power moves and a lot of like highlight reel type of attacks. But if you miss them, then you wasted a bunch of energy.
And that's the issue I have with her because she was missing a lot.
She missed a lot, man.
So that's the thing.
And the funny part is when her striking was clean and crisp, she was actually tagging Yasmine. If you really remember, she rocked Yaragui a few times, and then she's trying to follow up with these like spinning kicks. And
I think low key she actually did win the fight, but it was so close.
Yeah. And then we got Bobby Green and Jared Gordon. Speaking of close fights that somebody probably low key won, we got Jared Gordon coming back after the controversial loss, if you want to call it that, against Paddy Pimblett, that was just crazy.
I went back and look at that fight. You might can argue that Paddy won that second round because he turned up towards the end, but other than that, he still lost the first and third clearly. So you can't even argue that he won the fight. I don't understand how you can make the argument. And then Jared, he has good defensive awareness. He was blocking all Paddy's punches.
But let me tell you something. Leading up to that fight, I had gave you a statistic that Jared Gordon, with all the fights that he's had in the UFC, he's never had one knockdown. if you look at the way he was landing that left hook on Patty so clean, man, it really called into question Jared's knockout power for me, because I'm like, you already don't have a knockdown, and you hitting this dude square on the chin at will, basically.
And he wasn't even hurting him.
And Patty was just walking forward. Now, Patty walking forward was not helping him get points or nothing. He was just a punching bag walking forward. He still lost walking forward now, don't get me wrong. But the fact that Jared was able to land that cleanly that often and not rock Patty once was crazy. That's so odd to me. And then on the other side, we get Bobby Green. It's so odd with Bobby, man. He really is just, he's a talented fighter that you can't depend on. And I cannot get the Dustin Poirier fight out of my head, no matter what. And even leading up to the Drew Dober fight, I brought up the fact that Drew Dober kind of reminded me of the Dustin Poirier fight, because
Southpaw,
a lot of knockout power. He gonna be focused. He more than likely will start off losing early against Bobby, but he's tough enough to stay in it for Bobby to make a mistake. And we were watching the fight live, and it played out just like that. Bobby was winning, was dropping his hands, all this like playing around and stuff. He rocked Drew Dober. I think he dropped him a few times, let him up. I don't understand, man. I don't get it.
I think it's mental aspects that Bobby Green, he lacked, because if you were more confident, you wouldn't fight with your hands down like that. I understand his hip movement is good enough to do it from time to time, but you fighting the whole fight for 3 rounds with your hands down, and Drew Dober set him up, because Drew Dober, he had him move his head, but then when Bobby Green moved his head to the right, he didn't have nowhere to go. And then that's when Drew Dober threw the left hand. When you fight with your hands down, that's a recipe for disaster. But Bobby Green should have won this fight easily.
He should have won that fight, man, and he shouldn't be here. I still think he'll beat Jared Gordon, just because we've seen Bobby Green get knocked out, not necessarily because of having a bad chin, but just because of the fight awareness and the playing around aspect of it. But we've seen him get knocked out and come back and be unfazed and go on win streaks. And I don't think Jared Gordon has the power to stop Bobby Green. I mean, Bobby would really have to drop the ball here, if I'm being honest, because the way Patty was fighting, his hands was down. It wasn't on purpose, but that's just the way he fight with his chin in the air. But I just don't see Jared being able to take Bobby down like that. I don't see him being able to control him.
Hey, wouldn't it be messed up if Jared actually lose momentum because he got the controversial loss? And that could actually play a factor into this too, because, you know, the psychology of losing, he still lost. So they can actually affect you mentally. But
they gave him Bobby Green for a reason, man. You never know what you're getting with Bobby. I'm saying on paper, all of that I just said makes sense. But in the real fight, Jared is going to be more consistent. I ain't saying he's the most consistent fighter just in general, but he's more consistent than Bobby. Like, his effort is there. And then we got Brad Tavares and Bruno Silva.
Speaking of effort, Brad Tavares, man, he can take a beating.
Yeah, he had those 2 knockout losses. At that one point, I think Nate Marquardt got him and Edmund Shabazian or somebody. But after that, normally Brad ain't a person that just get knocked out like that. But he's fighting somebody with a lot of power and a point to prove, because Bruno actually went to war with Alex and then got beat by Gerald Milshart.
One thing I hate from Bruno Silva is when he fought Gerald Milshart, Bruno was just throwing punches and missing. Bruno don't have a jab. He don't set none of his strikes up. He just walks forward, throws the right hand, and that's his moneymaker, but he doesn't set it up. But I'm
going to tell you why that happened in that fight. You said it in the preview, because people underestimate Gerald. Because we've seen Gerald get knocked out and embarrassed a few times. And I hate to say it, but now you have to look at his record and what he is, and he's doing good. But there was a point, man, where Gerald was just a guy that you could kind of steamroll. I hate to say it like that.
Yeah, but the thing is,
and Bruno thought that was going to happen.
Bruno liked for people to make mistakes and catch him, like Jordan Wright did. Jordan kind of walked into it. And the same thing with Alex Pereira. Like, when he fought Alex, he wasn't really setting nothing up. Alex was just avoiding his punches, man, because he
but he rocked Alex a few times.
He rocked him, man, but he was also missing a bunch of punches too.
I know, but on a technical level, if he was able to connect, bro, he had a better fight than Izzy did on the stand-up portion of it. And
I can see this fight just being sloppy. If I'm gonna just be honest,
I can see this fight being boring, because one thing Brad Tavares can do, he can make a fight real boring, and he can set it at his pace where there's not a lot happening, because after he got knocked out those 2 times, he fight real safe. Like, he's real tough, don't get me wrong, and durable, but he became very, very cautious and tentative. I don't want to say it like that, but he became more calculated afterwards, and so he really liked the fight to be at a certain pace, and if the fight is at a pace where he can't control it, he don't really adapt well if that makes sense. Like, he'll be okay with just getting beat, like against Dricus, as long as he don't get knocked out.
It's funny because when Brad fought against Omari, every time he landed, he was hurting him, but he just wasn't throwing a lot.
He don't want to take a chance because you don't want to open yourself up to trying to finish somebody and getting caught. Like, it's like an overcorrection. I've said all the time, man, Brad Tavares should have been far more successful in the middleweight division than he has been because all the physical tools are there. I would argue that he's good mentally as far as where he fights at. He hovers around, what is his ranking?
Brad, he shouldn't be in the top 20.
He's in a spot where he probably won't be a top 10 fighter. And sometimes you could probably put him at the tip of being a top 15, but because of the conviction that he fight with, he ain't getting past that point, man.
At his peak, he was like number 8, though.
But then we got Sergei Pavlovich and Curtis Blaydes in the main event.
Ain't no point in spending too much time on this because this fight might not last that long. This fight may last.
So what you think gonna happen?
Man, I think Sergei gonna happen. I think Sergei gonna happen.
You think Sergei gonna knock out Curtis Blaydes?
I think so, man.
Curtis only been beat by Francis Ngannou
but Curtis,
Derek.
Curtis, he need to chill out with this fight, man. Like, I think Curtis could have got title shot fighting the other opponents. When you calling out the Sergeis,
there was nobody else to fight. Cyril Gane had.
I think you can maintain your win streak when you fighting other people. Okay, I prefer him fighting Sergei Spivak than Sergei Pavlovich.
Sergei had a fight against Derek Lewis 2 months ago.
So you saying he had to fight
Sergei? Look, Cyril Gane had a fight coming up. Stipe is out. Sergei was coming off of a win against Tatu Avasa. Tom Aspinall injured. Tatu Avasa coming off a loss. Alexander Volkov, he don't even deserve the fight. Even on a win streak, he don't deserve it. I think he already beat Volkov anyway. Spivak had a fight coming up. Jairzinho don't deserve the fight. He might have already beaten Jairzinho. I don't. And Marcin Tybura, that's the top 10.
That's what you're saying. And before the John Jones fight, Curtis said in the interview that he has to get one more win to get a title shot. Yeah. So he's not number 1. Stipe is number 1.
And Sergei worked his way up to being at this level because Sergei wasn't here before the Tatu Avasa fight. So it just kind of worked out like this. But
hold on, I gotta see what Sergei.
I can see either fighter winning, but Sergei,
he's 66%. I don't think that's enough, man.
Look, it's hard for me to pick against Curtis. If your name ain't Francis Ngannou, I can't pick you against Curtis because that wrestling just too much. And I know his hands are getting better. I wouldn't play around with the hands with Sergei Pavlovich, to be honest.
Interesting.
I wouldn't test that. But I would definitely put Sergei on his behind because if you remember, they said Sergei trained with Daniel Cormier. And at the end of the Tatu Avasa fight, in the post-fight interview, Sergei made a joke to Daniel saying, I remember we trained together, and I think Daniel may have gotten the best of it because of the wrestling. Remember he made that little joke where he was like, I remember how you kind of did me in training, so I've been working on my wrestling. And that lets me know that there ain't that many weaknesses to Sergei Pavlovich's game.
But let me say this, though. We said the same thing because on paper, Curtis is supposed to beat Derek Lewis. That's Derek Lewis' last win, right?
But Derek Lewis is lightning in a bottle. I'm going to be real with you. Derek knocked out a bunch of people who never been knocked out before. He knocked out he beat a bunch of people that he was losing the fight up until he won. It's kind of hard to hold a Derek loss against anybody.
Yeah, but he was winning against Derek, and then he just, over time, he started getting more sloppy. That's the thing, like, Curtis, he has to stick to the game plan to maintain his focus.
But it ain't that often that he does that. Like, that was one time.
No, he does it. He did it against Alexander Volkov, and he got desperate. But I'm saying he was able to get the takedown.
How many rounds was that fight?
That was 5 rounds.
That was a 5-round fight. Of course you're going to make a mistake.
No, I'm saying, like, against certain level, you can't just get sloppy with your takedown.
But I'm going to be honest. What is Sergei going to look like in rounds 2 and 3 and 4 and 5?
I don't know.
So, you know.